So, ladies and gentlemen, fanboys and girls, nerds, weebs, and otaku, welcome back and welcome home.
Well, hello there, Apple Buddies. This is your Applebite Written Writ Ralph talking to you straight from our show here, The Written Writ, a show where you and I and you get together, get creative, have fun, and geek out. And I'm coming straight from my studio, or whatever you want to call this thing that I have back here. This eclectic form of collecting, maybe. And of course, I have my Wham Stand mic, folks. This thing is beautiful. Wham Stand does an amazing job. If you guys want to get your tables to look special, hit Wham Stand up. He has so much stuff to make that table something different. And of course, next to me, we have AZ Vault. And of course, you know, if AZ's in the house, it's time to geek out.
Absolutely. Thank you for the lovely intro, and I'm loving that. That I haven't seen the big intro splash that you guys have had before since last time I was here. So
that's right.
That's fun, man. It's great seeing you guys all hanging out, having fun, and traveling around. That's really cool.
It's funny because you know it was the special video that we had that Nathan did for Anime NYC. But it's so much fun. It's just so much us that, you know, I'm like, this is like an intro to all of us. So,
yeah, it's so cool too because I don't usually get to see like all of you guys together very often. So, seeing like a little collage of everyone bouncing around, I'm like, oh, that's fun. I like that.
Do you hit the conventions over there in Australia?
Not as much as I would like to. I am your typical art goblin most days, so I'm hoping to do that more so after Punky launches. I'll be hitting up a lot more when that happens.
Well, that actually makes sense because then you have something on the table.
Yeah, exactly. At the moment, though, I'm mostly spending my time just chained to the desk, doing the grind, and that's about my life for the last couple of years. So that's why I haven't been able to explore and see as much of the stuff as I'd like to. I think there is some awesome stuff coming out that I'm seeing sort of travel through the back channels that I'm seeing coming out from everyone. But outside of that, I mean, I would personally love to come over and just do a lot of the conventions over there. They don't really compare. Like the conventions in Australia are pretty good.
Right.
But I would just be excited for the sheer volume of the stuff that you guys have over there. There's a lot more of them. I mean, it's like the scale of America is a little bit like 3 or 4 different countries kind of smashed worth of space into this like very tight interwound community, and everywhere something's happening, it's kind of kicking off if you're willing to travel and capable of doing that. And so the more I sort of look into it, the more I'm like, yeah, that would be really exciting to just kind of travel around and do the circuits over there. Because I mean, we have one will kind of pop off here and then it's gone. And then like several months later on the other end of the country, another one will sort of pop off. So it's not really as big of a thing. It, we still have we have our fun. We have our fun, but it's like the scale that you guys have it to is just really exciting to me, to be honest. Like, I think that's I'm trying to not do the Australian swearing. It's like it's really.
I don't know. Did I curse already? Because usually that's what happens. Like I already cursed way
but
before.
every time I get on air, I just slip into immediately Australian mode where like we use swear words as exclamation points, and I'm like, oh, I better not do that automatically.
It's funny. I tell that to my daughter all the time. I tell her that she use the words as an exclamation.
Yeah, absolutely.
I gotta say, before we continue, because there's only like 17 minutes to go here.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it has 17 minutes to go, folks. AZ is part of this. Mike and him did a cover for this, and it looks fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I always love collaborating with Mike Ratliff. Like, we're at a point now where I think people just sort of marry us together. So even in different
studios. I can see why though,
now,
because it just stands out.
It's always great. He has like his really fun animated, like very big attitude style to how he draws things, and I love being sort of bringing the big attitude colors into it as well. So it's sometimes having the really poppy colors on some other projects I do. It's not the fitting place for it, but I always feel like with Matt's stuff, or Mike's stuff, sorry, we get to go and have a lot more fun with it, and I do enjoy that a lot.
Dude, when you guys get together, it's just brilliant. In more ways than one, I'm not even talking about just the colors.
I mean, it's honestly, it's a lot of fun when we do get to finally marry up. It's kind of like it's a fun little retreat. Like, I do find that, again, like being the art goblin, I'll usually be kind of like sitting down in amongst several projects. And then every once in a while, like, Ratliff will just kind of come along and be like, hey, are you ready? And I'm like, oh, it's happening. It's happening.
Let's do
another one.
Come on, we got this. This looks fantastic. And you can upgrade to a metal cover or no holofoil and metal. Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's Mike Tenner. He has like some really good, really enticing sort of add-ons to a lot of the projects that he does. Mm-hmm. And I mean, if anyone's really an absolute beast at doing this kind of stuff by now, it's him.
I always see all these Kickstarters show up, and I'm like, when does he rest?
The truth is, he doesn't. Like, he has he actually put a call out the other day. He's like, I might have to take like a couple of weeks off just to sort of have a break and like, blah, blah, blah. And we're all just like, you don't have to ask, dude. Like, just
take a break. Yeah.
just take a break. And it's like, but like, he's working constantly all the time. Like, as you can see, even just there's like 27 created. And I know for a fact he's got more than that. Like, so I think that might be just on this account. Like, I think they're up to like 38 comics the last time I checked. And that's not in counting how many issues in those comics. So, it is a ridiculously beastly volume of content being created inside Bad Bug Media. So, yeah, it's absolutely like, yeah, if there's someone who's putting their nose to the grindstone and getting it done, it's Mike Tenner. So, yeah.
Yeah, dude, he's the kind of person that you want in your corner if you're doing a Kickstarter.
Well, yeah, I mean, he knows what he's doing, and that's the thing. Like, he gives a lot of how do I phrase it? He gives a lot of free advice that is really very important. Like, I mean, obviously, you can talk about this kind of stuff, at nauseum. But like, to kind of succinctly put it, like, really, you sort of, hello,
Mr. AZ Volt, what's up? What's up?
I think Nathan was gonna jump on. I was like, AZ's here. Nathan's gonna be like, hey, AZ.
I didn't even know. I just saw the link and I clicked it. I am underground. Let's go.
I was wondering why it was so noisy next to you.
Yeah, there's like, I guess, like, when it comes to the sort of advice he gives out a lot of the time. Like there's a lot of really good advice that he'll kind of put into chunks and just throw out into the public to kind of help chum the water and get other people involved in their projects. I think sometimes, like, I'm really surprised at like how often that stuff gets looked over. Like sometimes it gets taken really seriously, other times it gets looked over. But there's even like little things like, you know, new people don't even look at the economy often enough of like I didn't either. When I first created Demoted Super Zeros, it was like, I'm going to make this 50-page comic. And then I started actually looking into it. And I'm like, after like working alongside Mike Tenner, I just kind of went, oh crap. Like actually like economically, like this isn't inside the wheelhouse of most people's risk it budget. And so risk it for the, you know, for the biscuit kind of thing. Like they got to kind of be like, all right, I can afford to gamble on, you know, a 15 or 25-page comic that is inside the price house. But when it's someone's first time buying from you, let alone buying that particular comic, they probably aren't going to spend the money that would take to purchase like a 50-page comic from you at a gamble. And so like it's really sort of a bit of a moment to be like, hey, be humble. Like you got to kind of put something out there that people can actually afford to take a risk on. And they are taking a risk really. And so
I agree with you. It's really humbling, you know, because I've been trying to put my comic together for a long time, and the more I work on it, the more I understand, the more I'm like, oh my god, I don't know how people do this.
It's a beast. It's honestly a big beast. Like I remember when we first talked back in, God, it was like lockdown era. Yeah, and it was like back then I was like, yeah, man, I'm making this thing, and it's like since then I've just been like, oh my god, I got to totally redesign that thing. I am just living on a pipe dream bubble. Like I've just got to like bring this whole thing back. Like the like Demoted Super Zeros still exists.
Right.
It's still moving forward, but I did have to kind of pull it back and be like, actually, like where's my focus for this writing? Like where is like the medium that I was writing for was probably better written for like a novel. And then I needed to kind of bring it back in line with a comic. And so, yeah, there's been like, you know, over that like last half a decade of just nonstop working with studios, I'm just like, you know what? I've learned a lot. And like that project was my teething project. And then, since then I've got like several other of my own projects that are kind of making their way through. So this last year's been really about just getting.
Yeah, I noticed it's not just one book anymore. You know, it's like 4 books now.
It's more actually. It's more. And the funny thing is, I'm actually running into, and I've talked to a lot of other studio heads in different studios about the struggle. And the struggle for me isn't even the money. It's like I went out and I spoke to some investors and stuff, and I managed to get funding behind the comics. Like I had to take basically the entire scripts for every single one, break them down into storyboards, and then I had to come back with the financial feasibility and the launch strategies and marketing strategies. And I basically took everything that I'd learned over the last 5 years and put it on a table in front of the people, like did the meeting. And then they went, yeah, we will pay for this to all launch at the same time. So imagine an entire comic verse launching at once. And that's what I was like, okay, if I can do this will launch at once. It'll be close to almost 7, maybe even 10 comics just coming out at once.
Wow.
That are all interconnected, but all individual stories that are completed. And so you don't have to read one to read another one. You can just focus on the one you like, but all of them are kind of in the same world with similar background events happening.
You mean comics how they used to be?
Yeah, and I sort of went like, okay, like I can launch this. And then so I was like overly blessed with that. And then what I sort of found was I had a really hard time finding artists, because if you're going to launch kind of like a studio with a married theme, you kind of you can have things kind of change a little bit between comics. That's fine. But the styles do have to sort of marry the theme as well as kind of connecting together. So there were little things like, and I actually had a really, really hard time finding cohesive art teams. And so, yeah, I've now got a little bit of a running gag at the moment, because it's like Punky. I lucked out with Donnie. That was fantastic. Like Donnie's really married up the style.
Mm-hmm.
I did have to kind of do the art thing and like let go a little bit and be like, this is someone else's line work. So like, as much as I like Punky with more of this bubbly style,
Right.
Donnie is a blocking style. And so we kind of had to meet halfway and kind of go like, your blocking style here, my bubbly style here, we're good. And that's a little bit of just being realistic. Like, you can't expect everyone to draw the same as you.
Oh,
And
definitely.
then I sort of got into a point where I went, all right, well, that's done there. The next one that I was trying to get out the door was Trapdoor. And Trapdoor's kind of had this situation where it's kind of been cursed by an eternal just chaos situation where, like, you know, there was one art first art guy just vanished, and I was like, I still don't know what happened, and I'm really hoping that nothing bad happened. Then, you know, the next person, we had a bit of a translation breakdown. Like, I couldn't really get things across the line properly to them, and like, you know, so again, like, when you're really handing someone writing and maybe some pencil scratchings to get the imagination that you have translated. You're working with mental clay, and
Right.
it's not always incredibly easy for that to happen. So you really do have to make sure that, like, the two of you marry up on being able to create a sculpture via a game of telephone. So you're so yeah, we sort of that one, I just went, okay, like, you know, we gave it about 4 pages and went, I think it's going to be because I was really having to come back into it a lot more.
Right.
And I'm like, no, I need to be able to leave these projects and step back so I can become a creator and a director. So I just went, no, okay. I did that. We had different issues happen about 4 or 5 times,
Right.
including, like, you know, just some of them were great artists, but it would take like a month to a month and a half to get one page. And then I was just like, okay, that's not going to work because production speed. And then, yeah, it got to a point where I'm just like, and the blessing of that whole situation though was it gave me so much more time to cook on it.
Right.
And so now I've sort of gotten Trapdoor to a point where I'm like, okay, this is actually going to be a partial hybrid graphic novel. I've gotten these sections done, and I got to evolve the world so much more. And that's the problem. It's a problem and a blessing, because if the longer that a writer sits on a project, the more it stews, the more it marinates, the more
definitely. The more it
and
changes.
so and so that really sort of ended up happening. And so yeah, so again, putting the call out there, if there are teams of artists who work in professional capacities, yeah, there's the call. Drop into my Discord, say hey, let me know you exist. And
This is very ambitious, you know, what you're doing. And I like the fact that you're already like put the sound bites out and the ears out there to figure out how you can do it. Yeah, this is like I don't know, I guess I don't know. I don't think it's been done, because even when Marvel and DC and you know, all these guys started, they didn't just like drop 7 books in a row.
No, not at all. Yeah, that's the thing though. It's like, I think it's you'll see the same sort of saturation marketing happen in novels, right? So like, basically one of the things that novel studios really love is the whole like, oh wait, you've written 6 books, now we'll take you on.
Yeah.
Because if they sell one, your readers will basically want to run in and chew up at least the next 3 books you made.
Exactly.
And so like, it's yeah, there's a little bit of that whole like, because a lot of the time I see people who love what they read, but then you're constantly bombarded and saturated by more stuff and more stuff and more stuff.
Yeah.
That eventually it's not by any fault of anyone other than just like there's too much to keep a hold of in your memory. And then like a year and a half later, when the next comic's out, you know, you're trying to reach them, but the algorithm's actually kind of really hostile out there at the moment. And it's just kind of like, yeah, like, I mean, I have almost 5,000 people on Facebook, but, you know, I'll only get exposure to maybe 200 people on a post, and it will, like, you know, and it'll maybe give me like, and that's not sort of like, because it'll show you if you put the apps on, it'll say like exposed
tell
to
you everything,
people. Yeah, and it'll kind of show you how many people are viewing, like, or have seen it, not just engage with it. And, you know, when you go and research all the algorithm.
Now that you're talking about this, I have to say, because you know, a lot of people go, oh, you buy advertisement, but I think it's funny though, because what ends up happening when you buy advertisement, and it's something that pisses me off, is that your normal crowd finally sees what you're doing. Not
Yeah,
even new
yeah,
people.
absolutely.
It's your
And
regular crowd from your regular page who wasn't seeing it before. All of a sudden now with advertisement, they're seeing it now. And I'm like, why do I have to pay for the people on my page to see what I'm doing?
and that's why, like, when you were saying before, you were like, oh, what links would you like on this thing? And I put down Substack and I put down Discord, because that's the two places that anyone who wants to contact me or see my stuff can get direct access anytime they like. And so basically, like, I'm even contemplating moving my D&D games that I play from my private D&D channel, and even just going like, you know what, I'll just put it into my art channel. People can come and listen because it's a creative thing. And a lot of the time, well, a lot of the things that I do in my games, because like it's a form of writing as a GM, I GM my games. A lot of that stuff will make its way into the stories or comics I make or the artwork I do. So,
dude, I'm happy you're saying that, because I've been telling people for a while now, especially because it kind of came to me as I was looking for ways to explain writing to people when I was doing my writing show. And I was like, there has to be an easier way to explain it. And I came down upon an easy way to explain people who play D&D, which is you start off as a beginning writer and you're creating this character. And that's what you do. You create your character. You create the character you're playing in this game. So you're playing in somebody else's soapbox, but you're creating this character. And, it's like beginning writing. And then as a DM, you start to play in this sandbox, in this world, because you got all these rules that you're given to, and you play in that sandbox, and you start to figure out the rules. You start to figure things out. And then as a more experienced DM, you start to create your own world, because now you understand the laws and all the stuff that go into the universes. And that's just writing right there. Those are the different levels.
Yeah. And it's like, and it's the better. And I think when people, so I've seen people want to get better at as being GMs, and they'll spend a lot of time focusing on, watching other GMs, and they'll be like, oh, this exciting idea. But it's like, if you actually focus on writing, you'll figure out why those GMs are doing the things they're doing. Like, because an example, like for myself, right? Like I was saying in the green room before, after going through all the different styles of writing, I realized I'm first and foremost a character writer.
Right.
And so for me, how a character is motivated and driven and the conclusion of a character's arc are more important to me than the plot points and when the plot beats hit.
Right.
And so, I want the things to be driven by, feeling and reason and reactivity and reasoning and things like that. And so just a quick example of that, because I know we're running out of time as well. But basically, like when it comes to, like there's one of the players in my game came in, and they were a writer. They're a writer too. They actually work at a university, and they mark papers, and they help with English and stuff like that. And so they came in. They had this character that was, from one of the novels that they'd written, and they were like, okay, this is a character that I'm inspired by. I'd like to flesh out more in my head. So they popped them into the game. Now, there wasn't really an inherent flaw that I found was driving the character by about halfway through. And so I'm like, okay. So what I ended up focusing on was the fact that all of the positives, how they were framed. Right. And so they were driven by love. They were loyal to their goddess, like it was a paladin, all this sort of stuff. And then they had this one moment where I was just like, yeah, I just want to do a shatter moment. And I kind of turned up and then went like, or the blink. I had the blink moment. And I kind of turned around and went, okay, yeah, except that all these things that you cling to aren't real. Like it's not real love.
Right.
You're just obsessed. You have an obsession with this person. You have an obsession with this goddess. You have this like drive, like, true love is happy for da 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 da. And it was like this big moment of just kind of going like, you're clinging to this. And that was the first step towards the shadow version of the game. That kind of got the character to stop and kind of be like, wait a minute. And then the next part was actually having this big ritual thing, and having them actually like realize, like in my universe, there's a shadow split between like the soul and the mind at the point of death.
Right.
So there's three parts, the Trinity: the body, the mind, and the soul.
Mhm.
And when those things no longer are in union, they go off in their own directions. So you can't just sort of be like, resurrect someone. It's like, actually, you're going to have to wrangle their brain, wrangle their soul, get the body back. And anyway, this kind of situation almost occurred in the game.
Right.
And when it did, he discovered through means and that he was just the mind inhabiting the body, and the soul had been removed, and his soul had been replaced with his goddess's desire, turning him into a weapon, an obsessed weapon. And then basically at this point, he was like, hang on. And he was confronted with the resurrected version of his own heart, his own soul. And, you know, this younger version of himself, this unmarred version of himself was just like almost like he looked at him and he's like, this version's kind of ignorant and, you know, has all of this, like, they're so gung-ho and they're so dumb. And it's like, isn't that how our brain and our hearts interact? And so, like, we got to have this whole thing of, like, the logical brain and the impulsive heart kind of, like, clashing against each other. And, like, the flaw was literally presented directly in front of him. And he got to basically run alongside it, and the two of them trying to learn how to merge back together. And, you get to have that fun. Like, you get to play with it when you're really writing these games. And, but again, that sort of came from a writing prompt that was like, hang on, what is the flaw of this character? Okay, he's written pretty puritanical. That's going to be the flaw. How can I twist this in a way that becomes the aha moment or the trip moment? And sort of move on and on from that. And so yeah, that's predominantly how I sort of approach a lot of my story writing, even the silly ones like let's face it, like Punky, which is coming out next, is really a silly, goofy, retro slapstick bubblegum. And it's really meant to be tongue-in-cheek. Like, it's meant to be cheesy.
I love what I've seen far of it. So,
oh, it's a lot of fun. I'm like, I want to just keep showing everybody, but I can't because then there's nothing left to show. And like, but the villain is literally like so, like we're actually following the villain and Punky in unison. Like, it kind of flicks back and forth between them.
right.
And it's as much his story as it is hers. And Punky's in this whole dilemma trying to figure out like how the hell they've started getting the powers of video arcade machines and why all of these monster goons are turning up all over the place and trying to attack her. And at the same time, this villain is trying to like gain the ultimate power of everything, you know, very typical 80s cheesy stuff. And
it all feels
Punky's
80s. The video games, the villain,
oh, everything. Yeah, it was. I mean, it's my childhood basically, just going like, please let me play. And so pretty much just having like even the Team Rocket blasts off again situation. Like, every time the villain tries to use the powers, it literally melts his entire body and then teleports him off somewhere else.
Oh my god!
And so it's like kind of like Dr. Robotnik flying in and then going like, bah! And then like vanishing. And it's like, so I was like, yeah, like from arcade machines, there's always the big boss flies in and then the goons attack and the big boss flies off. And I was like, I wanted my version of that. And so having his body literally just liquefy, and then he turns up somewhere and he's like, what the fuck is happening? Like, and like he wants,
I don't get it.
yeah. And so basically the whole thing is like Punky has control of things and he has control of people, and he wants the full thing so he can gain control of all things in reality.
Right.
But Punky has largely taken away his ability to manipulate the world. And she doesn't know how she's done it. She doesn't know why it's happened. And she's just trying to get home. She just wants to basically get the hell out of there and finish her shift. And this guy is throwing after her. But even like funny little things that happen, like, you know, like we know when we're playing Doom, like someone would kick the crap out of the Doom character, and then you'd see like down the bottom, and like Wolfenstein as well, you'd see down the bottom the character's face is getting beaten up and everything.
Yeah.
And then the moment you heal them, it's like, oh yeah, that feels good, and they're like back to normal. And I thought, oh yeah, like it's gonna be hilarious having like her getting, you know, beaten the crap out of, and you know, her outfit, it's already a skimpy outfit, so it's like getting ripped the hell out of, and she doesn't like it. She's just like, I hate this outfit, this is not great. and then she heals, which the first time she heals, she has to actually eat chicken out of a trash can. And she's like, and like there's like this little voiceover. So if you see the little blue up the top,
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's like, player 1 start, and like
Exactly.
that's actually a character. There's a voice that starts turning up, and so like Punky in that second panel is actually, wait, what player what? Who's saying that? Like she's kind of like, wait, who's saying this? What's going on? And
I
then
can see it, man. It sounds like something I do when I play around with my friends and I do the movie man voice, and they're like, he didn't know it yet.
Yeah.
He was about to get into trouble. Who's saying that?
It's like that story time guy. Yeah, it's like story time. He was about to kiss the girl, and he's like, "Wait, what? No?
What are we talking about? What girl?
No, I'm not." He was gonna ask her to marry. You are? No.
I love that. That's always a great concept for me because dude, you're probably just like me, so there's always a voice like that in my head.
Oh, dude, like unmedicated, unmanaged ADHD running rampant. So like, yeah, I've got like stories and narratives running around in there like crazy.
Oh yeah,
probably like a bit of maladaptive daydreaming as well. So it's I've just learned to financially commodify it. Basically, hi, you want to buy my mental illness? Here, I'll help you make your stories. So yeah, it's working pretty well for me so far. I've learnt that I do really well in team positions, or where basically I'm overlooking a team, because like I tend to be connecting lots of pieces of puzzles, and I think you do the same thing too, where it's like you see a whole story, and then suddenly it'll be like someone will forget to put like someone will forget to like remove one of the fingers on a hand in page 28, and you're like, hey, they lost that finger in page 3.
What's going on?
Yeah, it's like those little details just jump out at me. So, I like the position. Like, it's taken me years and years to figure like this is where I belong. I think when it comes to like, yeah, that's the thing with Punky, like having these so there's this little voiceover character that's following her around. There's basically this situation where she's controlling a whole bunch of things, and like just learning it, like right there where she kicks is like the first time she figures out she has basically like pixelated digital powers.
Right.
And so yeah, hence like why everything's a little squarish. Like she's just kind of whap and like hitting with these powers.
I think one of the things I've always loved, and it comes across in your coloring, even in other things that you do. It has this feel of 80s video games. Especially your project here, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And like having, I think with I think when it comes to there's another one here. I think if I can, I think it's like the guy with the purple one. You can sort of see where he's like, there's one of the pages in the other one where he ends up in a trash can. And but yeah, effectively that's sort of like the thing, and it sort of progresses along. We're almost at the end of the pages now. So like, yeah, again, it's like I wanted that very so yeah, Donnie sort of threw me this splash page of like,
I gotta say, man, how would you feel if you all of a sudden you just died and all of a sudden you reappeared somewhere else? Just like it happened in the video game.
Yeah, and that's it. I figured like not until issue 2 will I show what happened to this guy before, but like he does sort of mention on that page like what happened to my body, and like he does sort of turn into this grayish purple guy with like twisted runes over his body. And you sort of start to realize over time, like, hang on, he is being messed up by this constant magical recreation. And he does
look like it's peaceful. Just by looking at this page, it doesn't look like it's peaceful at all.
I mean, in all fairness, if you saw what he did on a couple of pages before it, you'd be like, good. He definitely deserves it. He basically runs up to like the sort of, let's call it the Mr. Miyagi type, and just kind of goes, screw this guy, bang. And it's hey, it's Abstracto, yeah.
There's so many stories and narratives.
Oh yeah. And like, yeah, Abstracto's making some great stuff out there too. He's got some really cool stories popping up that he's starting to put on his website. So that's been really fun to watch. He's got this let's call it it's an adult audience only comic about a fun sorceress goblin, and I will let you all follow the name. Just Google Abstracto. And
don't take it out yourself, folks.
I will make sure that I don't get this channel taken down so, by saying much more. Good fun for the grown-ups. But yeah, effectively when it comes to to Punky, I sort of realized a while back, with the chaos that was sort of happening and juggling multiple jobs in other studios, that a lot of the time my own projects were sort of being put to the end of the queue. And
yeah, that's what we do.
That was, and so what I sort of did by kind of going right, first person to pay me to do work, I take that payment, I pay an artist to keep one of my projects ticking along. Next person, I will do the next for the next artist. Next person, I'll do the next for the next artist.
That's a good way to think about it and do it.
And yeah, so while effectively I'm not making huge profits throughout the year, it's it is helping to keep the money in artist pool. And it's also helping to create those projects eventually. So it is a lot more slow moving than it would have been if I went the original way we were talking about with the investors and stuff.
Right.
But again, that's sort of, once I can turn up with them and say, here's my stable of artists, do you approve? Here's the proof of their work, yada yada.
Oh yeah. Well, once you get moving, once things get happening and they look at results, that's when they go, okay, we're in.
Yeah, exactly. And it's and again, so there's a lot of good things happening, a lot of good movement. There's a lot of things I want to do.
Like I told you in the green room, I can tell you've been busy as heck.
Oh man, I just came up with, I got more stories than I can deal with. There's one, yeah, it's I've literally been do I need to start making some companion novels that just sort of some of them are just too verbose for me to be these, it's I can make one maybe book of 150 words to 200 words and tell this story really well, or I'd have to make 5 comics to kind of tell this story.
I completely understand what you're saying, because I tend to write shorts, and I'd rather write the shorts than the long form.
Yeah. Oh man, that's the thing, that's a skill I'm starting to sort of figure out, is what stories belong in which pool.
Oh yeah.
Is it the novel pool or is it the comic pool? And I think when it comes to some of them, there's one I'm sort of developing, Nevermore, which is it's again sort of paying tribute to gothic horror.
With a name like Nevermore, that's what I thought.
Yeah, well, basically, long story short, there is effectively, so the script's pretty much done. Basically, Nevermore is a person from World War II whose soul has been pulled out of limbo. Basically, death has sort of gone, yeah, cool, I will let you earn your way out. And so think very much Crow-like feeling. There is a white raven that's kind of following them around called Evermore. And they have their sword, which is sort of their version of the scythe. And the whole difference is, though, with when we first see Nevermore, they sort of turn up into a room and there's this very adult ritual happening. And the 3 women that are performing the ritual on an unwilling participant are there to sort of, there's very much a doomsday cult situation.
Right.
And so Nevermore's there to stop people from perverting the plan of death. So again, there is sort of a Final Destination kind of feel on it. And Nevermore's
Final Destination, yeah.
Yeah, and so Nevermore is sort of the person who goes beyond the reach of what death can kind of orchestrate. So death kind of orchestrates minor little detail shifts, and big ones, like the log falls off the truck.
Right.
But what happens when people are hiding away from, death's reach? And it's okay, especially when they're warding themselves off with magic and things. Well, he sends in Nevermore. And so basically Nevermore's come in, basically goes to sort of do it. But Nevermore's flaw is that they're very idealistic and very they're very principled, and they're from that very old world era, and so they don't hurt women and children and animals. And so basically he turns up, kind of goes, hey, look, I don't want to hurt anyone. Then you can see this sort of action scene, him flipping around all over the place, and then finally stops. He's look, he kind of starts to try to restrain them, and then sort of goes like, I don't want to hurt you, and you see them just turn around and go, too bad, and gun in the face. And then you see the whole screen, the whole panel sort of fade to black. Then at that point, the page design, which I'm fucking loving, you see the whole thing turns black and white.
Right.
And you see his sort of very blue glowing sort of soul sit up out of the body. But then you see the bony fingers of death start to rise like pillars around the body, grip him, and then pull him down. And the page is actually the top line is just the black and white one where you see the bottom half of the body standing around the corpse. But then it goes into this super violet magenta world where they's pulled down through the astral. And then in the bottom part, the arm is swung along the panels where you see all the different emotions of this soul kind of being twisted as they're kind of slammed into the bottom corner. And then you find them sitting inside another body. And then basically Death kind of grills the shit out of them, kind of reads them their rights, and then they have this fight. So he's literally having a screaming match. And pretty much he's just being told, like, Death isn't idealistic. Death doesn't have these choices. Death is death. You're here to do the job. If you want to see your wife and child, you want to move on to where they moved on to, you have to do this. Or you can just go back to the bed you made. And it's like, pretty much that sort of sets up in 2 pages the floor and the stakes and everything like that. And then what you do sort of realize is, like, when he does get released back into the world, he's in a new body, and this body is just overdosed. So like all this magic sort of hisses everything out of the veins, gets the body moving back again. He stands up, but this person's still affected. So he's sort of having to learn how to stagger and stumble across the room. When it does come back to the other place, these women sort of like look over the body, pull the mask off this body, and they're just like, oh, this guy looks like he's been dead for like weeks. And it's like, then you start to sort of realize, like, yeah, he's a corpse jumper. So like he's kind of jumping from corpse to corpse until they sort of fall apart. Like it's not this beautiful romantic, like, oh yes, he's a sexy revenge thing. It's like, no. He's been living in undead bodies for a really long time. And yeah, so it kind of, that's just the beginning. I don't want to sort of give away too much more, but effectively,
that's a really great teaser right there.
Thank you. So yeah, it's like that's
I can't wait to see it now.
Honestly, like that's the thing. Like I'm sort of finding, like we were sort of talking about, like sometimes you have to learn how you want to write particularly. Right. And I just realizing I'm a character writer was the big shift. Whereas like previously, like Demoted has great characters, but was written by plot driver points, and by sort of like, and by it was written in acts, and so that's where I sort of stripped it all down and went, no, I'm coming back and writing it for characters, because like you've got, Mindy Monochrome, aka Mood Ring, the one who has no control over her emotions, and her emotions affect everyone else's reality. And I'm like, that's cool, let's rewrite her. And I'm like, okay, then you've got, the brain of the bunch, but the guy who falls apart literally crash. His entire body is just capable of popping apart, and then he can reassemble them in different ways. And I'm like, but at the same time, he's constantly trying to gain approval that he's more than just a guy who falls apart. And then I'm like, cool, that's a great character. Let's write it from a character point, not a plot point. And then you've got Chomp, who basically can eat literally anything. So he's basically that parody of Matter Eater Lad. And exactly. It's like, okay, so basically he could eat anything, but at the same time, he still has to deal with the calories. Yep. And so, basically having this whole thing where like, a guy who is a bit of a food snob, he also eats his feelings. And at the same time, he feels kind of like rejected by everybody because, all they want him for is his ability to consume things. They don't really want him for anything else. And so like, yeah, it's like, all right, well, he's on the older side. Like he's this bigger, older character. So like he kind of resonates with a lot more of the 40 plus people out there who are sort of like struggling with their weight and, wanting to eat what they want, but can't. And even if they do have the ability to,
that moment when you're eating like what, like you've been eating your whole life, and the next thing you know, you can't eat that way anymore.
Oh man, I'm going through that right now. I mean, I won't even. This would become a health channel if I open that category. So like, I'm just gonna say I fucking agree 1,000%. And then look, yeah, and then the last one out of the sort of main group is last one out of the main group is actually Clea, who's sort of our invisible girl. But the whole thing being is that like she's invisible, but can't make clothes invisible. And also her flaw is very much that she's vain as hell. Like she just needs to constantly have attention and validation, and she hasn't grown up from that yet. But the same thing is no one
horrible
actually,
though, because you're a person that needs that, and now you can turn invisible. That means you're not getting it.
No, and no one, and like that's the thing. So she got cancelled online because she kept saying she was at a battle, and but no one saw her there. So you know, and so everyone was like, "Oh, stolen valor!" Right, cancelled her, and then like you know, and she's like, "Oh, she tried to do only capes, but only capes doesn't work because no one can see what she's doing." And so basically, like, yeah, there's this whole sort of like story around her, and I went, okay, well, actually, I'm going to intertwine these. So like Trapdoor is involved in it. So Trapdoor is basically like my universe's version of Batman, effectively. But let's call it a little bit more messed up, or actually a lot more messed up. So again, character-driven sort of situation. So you've got like this over arc where, you know, the big story is really being told by, you know, from a Trapdoor situation.
Right.
They're there in the background pulling strings. And then you've got these other guys, sort of their character story is just really, the only story is really, I want to go get coffee. And that's it. It's very Seinfeldian. Like they're just like, let's go get yeah, it's like, let's go get coffee. And then along the way, each of these fuck ups are fucking up. And then, yeah.
I just wanted a cup of coffee.
Pretty much. And then like, yeah, so you've got like, you know, and then like even Punky is actually in this comic now. Punky basically is, because Punky's set in retro era. And so by the time you get to here, you find out like there's actually a fifth character that's been introduced in the rewrite.
Right.
And the fifth character is basically someone who's able to enter into video games. And they can actually, that's all they can do. They can go into video games. They can be injured in video games. They can be messed up in video games. They can't take anything out of video games. They can just go into them. And so it's kind of a useless power. It's very great for escapism. Yeah, so they spend a lot of time just hiding out in like safe little places like, you know, Farmville and stuff like that.
Right.
And
I would
basically,
too.
Yeah, and it turns out that they're the grandchild of Punky. And so when you do see Punky actually turn up now, like Punky didn't used to turn up in this comic. But now I was like, because now I'm like, oh, it's character driven actually. We need these things, these aspects. So family is important. So having Punky turn up and actually like try to check on her grandchild, and she's very old and she's dressed normally. And then basically when the big catalyst moment comes that sort of throws everyone through the grinder, Punky dies. And everyone gets taken. Everyone has all this moment of like failure that happens in stories. It's great. But that's when what do we know happens to Punky if she's got an extra life or an extra star up her belt? She goes bloop, 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 turns back into the Punky we know in her leotard and immediately says what Punky says when she ends up in a leotard, which was, fuck, not this again. And then basically we have Punky arcade beat 'em up involved there. We also have Trapdoor, who we know as Trapdoor, is involved again. So Demoted Super Zeros instead is a Nexus comic that connects all the other ones. It's basically our version of Avengers if Avengers was made by a very immature guy.
Well, Abstract was like, I have accepted the AZ role, all of us into the universe. All hail AZ.
I shall accept your praise. Thank you very much. There is no ego at all. No, it's I'm very excited to kind of be able to get that done. I also realized as I'm getting older, I can't burn myself out all the time and I need more chill time. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to like write. So I figure like, hey, I'm just going to do some gaming maybe once a week or a fortnight with the tabletop crew. I'll load it up into my Discord and we'll just tell stories and, you know, and shenanigans, and everyone can come and watch that. And then I'll probably be on the Discord doing some drawing too and getting art done. So people can come along and watch that as well.
Yeah, I like when you do those drawing on the spot things. You know, I know you did one with my partner Kadma, where I challenged you and you drew her up, and it came out really well. Do you like doing those? Because I know I love doing the challenges as well, and I do the same challenges with writing that you do with your art. Do you like doing those? Because I remember you did a lot of them before, Is this something you enjoy doing?
Yeah, I do. It's like it's kind of sometimes when I'm really low on dopamine, just sort of turning around and saying like, "Hey, give me a challenge, and I'll get this done, and like I'll see what I can make from it." And then everyone
Right.
will throw like 4 or 5 different words, phrases, characters
Oh
out
yeah,
there, and then I'll
same
just
as
sort of
me.
mash them up. And usually I'll just give myself, like an hour limit or something like that, like the same sort of thing I do for like a warm up exercise anyway.
Yeah,
And it's great. I get to interact with people, have some fun.
yeah.
They throw stuff at me that I would have drawn otherwise,
I've seen
which
it
really
a
it
couple times.
absolutely helps. Yeah, I mean, like honestly, like I think one of the ones where there was like sandworm titties on someone, and like I was just like, okay, like Beetlejuice sandworm boobs, got it, and like. There's nowhere in hell my brain probably would have come to that conclusion naturally myself. So I
Yeah,
was just
no, I
like,
don't think that's something anybody comes to naturally.
yeah, I still know that was Mal too. It's like he's a special man. And so yeah, so it was like I think having that sort of challenge is really, really good. It does actually help a lot to be able to say like, let's do this. The balancing act that I think is crazy though is that like, it's at a point now where I probably get like 4 days a week where I can really just be an artist, and the other times it's like work and family. And
Oh, I know.
so I
I
sort of
know.
am at a point now where I just kind of go like, okay, do I have the time to really do that sort of fun, or
Dude,
is
I
it really,
completely
yeah,
feel you. Yeah, because that's what happens. Because now, like before, I had partners that would help me with Bit and Apple, but they've gotten
yeah,
really busy with their lives. So now everything's on me. So getting writing done has become, like, okay, when can I get it done? I'm gonna sneak away over here and do something, But then all of a sudden somebody goes, "Hey, Ralph, can I come on to the show?" And then I have to go pull out the calendar, figure out who and
yeah,
what and when and when.
absolutely. It's a balancing act, and so that's why I sort of try to think like how many birds can I kill with one stone, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, look, I still want to connect with everybody, and so like I think for me over the next year, it's going to be a lot more time on Discord, a lot more time on Substack. So for those people who don't know what Substack is, and it might feel a bit like an alien thing to them, all it is another social media page, but instead of being focused on threads and feeds and stuff like that, it's kind of like a newspaper, and all of the people that you yourself can write your own newspaper.
Yep.
And people can basically see it, and other people can make their own newspaper and come and see it, and it goes directly as a notification into people's emails if they subscribe, which means that you're not being throttled by like Facebook saying you're only allowed to have 15%. Like, I don't know if people know this, but like if you post more than 3 times on Facebook, the rest goes relatively unseen. Like,
Oh, definitely.
and it'll make, and it also, when you post 3 times, it'll pick which one of those 3 posts it lets it do. I don't know about a social media app that tells you need to be antisocial is really a social media app anymore.
But look at TikTok. Like TikTok has all these rules on how you should post in order for it to get seen. Even though their algorithm is better than all the other ones, like if you post your videos back to back to back, they kind of get lost. But if you wait like 2 hours to post them, oh my God, man, I'm like, dude, if you're gonna make me do that, why don't you do a program where I can set it up and it can post it?
It's time delay, absolutely. And it's like, and that's the thing. I think like, so for anyone who's not really aware of Substack, that's what it is. There's
That's a
because
good.
I know
That's
I
a good
can't.
thing you're explaining it, because I know that a lot of people have heard of it, and but I don't think they really know what it is.
No, and it's like I didn't either, and it was again like I say, Mike Tanner gives out a lot of really handy advice, and this is basically the place where you can, if you're a creator, he advised it, and I would have to say I agree. Get on Substack and post weekly on Substack, and just people will start to kind of come through. But also people can go, subscribe, and it'll just send your things that you're saying and your updates that you're saying directly to their emails. So they get the notification on their phone. They get to see what they're doing.
It's like an upgraded email list.
It's a social media email list hybrid.
Exactly.
And it works really well. The other place as well, and if people haven't seen Discord, Discord is a place where effectively, you can directly interact. It's kind of, I think it's a little bit more like old school I think it's a little bit more like kind of old school ICQ kind of stuff, but with more chat rooms and stuff.
Yeah.
Like it's a very old school chat room system, but it's sort of made specifically for people who want to game and build community. And so like you can build community rooms, community chats and things like that. So for me, the way I use it is I do my live streams on there, and you can just walk in, click it, and you can start watching. But at the same time, I also post a lot of my art progress on there. I'll post updates on things that are happening in there. And yeah, so like, you know, that's sort of that. So I know people keep asking me, am I doing a Patreon again? Not in the next year. Basically, I can't keep up with what I want to do to provide you with a Patreon that I would want to provide you with. That's pretty much the long and the short of it, is like I'm working so much in other people's studios that really the only thing I could provide to my audience would be samples of work I'm doing for other studios. Exactly. And at the end of the day, if I was going to do a Patreon, I'd want to be creating purely AZ Vault art that they can follow and fun content and stuff that they.
And that's kind of difficult too, though, because you can't sometimes, like, you want to show something off, but you can't show it off yet until the person you're working for shows it off. Exactly.
Yeah. And sometimes you can't even show it off then. Like I've had I've had a few creators that even after like a year after they'd sort of already debuted it, they were like, no, I need to keep it here for this reason. And I'm like, okay. It's like, fair enough.
That's weird, but okay.
Yeah, it happens. I think there's also I've heard of other people as well where they've been hired by people to do stuff, and then they find out they were actually hired as a shadow artist and didn't realize. And so when the person sort of launched it, they're like, yeah, this is my thing. And then the person's like, oh, cool, I can release it. And they're like, yeah, this is what I did. And then it caused a whole bunch of controversy. I haven't been caught up in that yet, but there's like a whole bunch of stuff. That's why, like, usually.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. I've seen it happen a couple times.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna like.
Us writers sometimes go ghostwriter. And I know definitely that you artists sometimes go ghost artists.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been I try to work with people who like will be very open about stuff, because I just can't keep a track of too much on that, because like my brain just turns to mush after 17 other projects. So I just like I can't keep a track of that stuff. So I'm just like, okay, cool. Like I will. And right at the very beginning, I just sort of go like, hey, when do you want this displayed, or how do you want it displayed? And there's situations where I thought I might have been getting hired as a shadow artist, but then it turns out they were super proud to have me on board, and it wasn't at all that situation. And so like I've been really lucky not to fall into those situations. Like even situations where I'm like, oh, I probably like not even a shadow artist, but just like I don't really think I should probably even bother getting credit for this, because I'm 17 layers down the road away from the actual talent.
Right.
Like for instance, with storyboarding, it's like, oh, I don't really expect to get like, a written notification of recognition.
I feel sorry for the storyboarders, because they do a lot of good work, and they don't get to show it off. They don't get to. Sometimes those projects don't even ever go through.
Yeah. Well, Laguna Studios, for instance, are like really, really good at giving credit for like everyone in the layer. Like they're someone that I've found that I have like, and that's not to say other studios aren't great, it's just I haven't worked in those capacities in other studios. But like I've sort of been a couple of times now I've been the Hail Mary guy, that like they're just like, oh crap, things are falling through, let's get this art tornado guy to come in and like just start like ripping through the whole place. And like even then they don't want to disrupt the artists, and I usually agree with them on that. I'm like, I don't want to come in and do stuff that they would do and change the thing. So like we kind of, they sort of went like, hey, can you do storyboarding and thumbnailing? And I was like, yeah, I can absolutely do that. And so like we ran in and just like ran through the whole thing, and they're like, yeah, like, hey, how do you want to be credited? Where would you like to be credited? This and this and that. And like they were really sort of ahead. I never had to ask, like they were just right ahead of it and just like really on top of that. And so like that was for Heart Eater, like the next Heart Eater one, because like, yeah, like it can, I can honestly say like I've been in a situation where as an artist, like even just stress can like nuke your ability to kind of produce. And like you can be like
writing, it can mess you up, even though the same stress can make you better.
Yeah, right. And that's the thing. It's like it's a catch-22. I find like that's the thing as well. Like it's I mean, without getting too geeky on it, it's like there's you got the dopamine effect, and then you got the lesser known norepinephrine effect. And so basically, the more that the stress levels go up, that's the chemical that's going to make you keep going. And if that goes up too high, it kind of backfires and stops you. Like, you want less of it, not more of it. Whereas the other one, dopamine, you want more of it and less of it. And it's like, if you have like the imbalance go out. And so, yeah, like, so for a lot of people, especially I think a lot of creatives are sort of already hardwired for a little bit of divergency.
Oh yeah. It's funny because you're saying that, because I saw a video recently, because the world's stressed out right now. And the guy, he was going through everybody going, "Oh, you're doing bad, you're doing bad," and then he goes, "Artist, how are you doing?" The artist going, "What? We're doing great. We're doing a lot of art." And he goes, "Fuck," because the implication is, the implication is that we through the chaos, that's when we do our best stuff.
yeah. I mean, it's a crazy kind of catch-22. I think it's sort of like it's one of those things I was sort of pointing out to someone the other day. It's like the way that you approach artists can almost determine how your studio is going to succeed or fail. Because like if you wake up and you kind of have a little like pick me up tone as a creative director, like when I've had to creative direct people, like I'll see the reaction. Like it's like the job will get done well, but it'll take longer because they can't access if you come in and you're like too let's say thief of joy. Right. If you walk in as a director and you thief the joy out of the situation, they can't access hyperfocus. Yeah. And so they are working at mere mortal speeds. And so if you want them to access their superpowers, you have to be a provider of joy. And so you kind of come in and you're like, hey, like, this and this and this. And then you watch them kind of, they'll grab those life rafts, they'll grab those little lines of joy, and they attach it to themselves. And the next thing you know, yeah, you're like, it's a day. Something that should have taken them a week or two has come back in a day, and you're like, wow, and it's crazy.
Well, that's why I've never understood management and how they manage things, and I know I generalize management, but in all fairness, management has been generalized in my life.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't understand, because if your workers are happy, usually you get more out of them than if they're stressed out or if you're messing with them.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's from a creative director point of view. That's one of the hats that I had to like really sit back and look at and go like, okay, yeah, like the way that we approach like the thing. And the other side of it as well is, though, you've got to kind of be very firm on stuff, but like, very, because if you kind of go like, oh yeah, you're too sort of la, then you sort of end up kind of finding like, wow, this took like a month and a half to get like this thing back. And there was, deadlines, and like, they disappeared for like, 12 days, and then it took another 25 days to get the thing back. And
sometimes you got to be the tough guy, because look, I understand, but you promised me something, so you need to, because I feel like once you promise something, once you're on a deadline, then that's on you. If they're fucking with you, that's a whole other thing. But if you are on a deadline and you're on a deadline, and I know life gets in the way, but at the same time, that's just how it is. Like you have to juggle, like we were talking about earlier. Like I got to juggle Bit and Nap and all the stuff that's happening. You got to juggle all the things that you're doing, and you still got to figure out when you can do what you got to do. And if we have a deadline, we got to make sure it's done. We can't go, oh, I'm so sorry, but life got in the way.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, and like sometimes it will. Like I mean, like I had like calling myself out there. Like last year, I had like I had a terrible
oh, I remember.
like just health and literal natural disasters and all kinds of stuff.
I'm happy it's a little better for you.
Thanks, man. Oh, me too. Like honestly, like it took a lot. Let's just say that for people who are like, man, why is my health just messed up? Like sometimes it is so off the wall why it is. Like for me, it turns out I wasn't processing histamine. So that was it for me. So random, so randomly rare. And it's just like, hey, I'm not processing histamine. I can't even remember the random thing I was going by. I was just scrolling late at night one night, and then I just saw a video and I was just like, wait. And then like suddenly that was it. And I realized like, holy crap, like I got a histamine imbalance. And then like I went on a histamine diet. That worked. So I started popping H1 histamines. That worked. Started adding in H2 histamines. Oh my God, I got my strength back. Next thing you know, I'm just functioning like a normal dad and a normal person again. And I'm like, whew, that's good. And so, yeah, so like sometimes, and I think it happens a lot with artists. I see it a lot where they go through this like 2-year cycle and then a crash.
Yep.
And like, and I see them do it again and then again and again. And one of the scary things I sort of noticed while sitting around in the background doing the whole pattern recognition thing was how many of the artists we're losing in their late 30s, early 40s.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh my God, like this is happening a lot. So it terrified me when I was just suddenly like, holy crap, I feel like I'm shutting down. I really like it's like in all started. If anyone's wondering why Hypergeist 4 took a lot longer to get to you than Hypergeist 1, 2, or 3, that's on me. that was my health. Don't blame Mike. Basically,
I gotta say, like it kind of stood out because 1, 2, and 3 was like back. Then it was like you're like, what happened?
Yeah, like I literally was like, oh yeah, cool, I've got these pages out, and then I was just like, all right, cool. And then I was trying to grind through at one point there, like I was just in bed and I couldn't get out of bed for like 3 weeks, and then it was, I got up and I got 2 days and then back in bed, and then it's like da 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 da. And like Mike was pretty patient about the whole thing, so really thankful to him. So yeah, like calling myself out on those situations on deadlines. Yeah, I've been the guy who's not met it before. It's like that's
the same thing like you're saying right there. It's the same reason I can say it. That's why I can tell people sometimes, look, dude, I know stuff happens. These are deadlines. You have to take responsibility.
You do. Like, I mean, like I still sort of sat down and I chipped away and I just ground away at it. And I just sort of, the way that I sort of approached it, if anyone's wondering, like, how do you get through something like that? One panel at a time, like quite literally zoom in on one panel of like what I did was I did color blocking. So I just kind of got the page out and I just splashed color in the areas I thought it should go. Then I kind of diluted that color and then I just focused in on one panel and I went, I'm just going to color her skin. And then sometimes I just went, all right, you know what? I've got her skin color selected already. I'm just going to walk through all the pages I have and just add her skin in. And I'm just going to do one panel at a time. And then I go back and I'm like, I'm going to do it for the next character now. Now I'm going to do hair. Okay.
That's it, though. That's how you keep moving forward. You have to try to move forward. I feel like most people, once stuff happens, they kind of like, I give up. You can't do that.
No, I think also like very much like there's times when I've just wanted to be like that, where I'm just like, oh man, like let's not. And it's almost like a guilt thing. Like, let someone else who's not holding it back come in and do it. And I'm just, they need someone who can, and like someone's going to do this better. And, at the end of the day, like,
believe me.
Yeah. So like, I think also becoming a dad has been a big change for that for me. Because like at the end of the day, like no one else is going to feed.
As a dad, you start seeing what we're talking about right now. You start seeing it because you're trying to get your kids to do things that they should be doing, or to better themselves, or so they can be better people when they get older. And then you realize that there's this balance of things that needs to happen. Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, and these kids, and that's the thing as well. It's also like that kind of like. At the end of the day, like I can't just not cook them food. I can, but I'd be a terrible parent. So it's it's like at the end of the day, it's like, you gotta make them some nutritious food. You gotta get them to school.
I've been sick like crazy and I'll still get up, to take care of my daughter.
Yeah. And that's sort of how I see it. It's like, when it comes to, that sort of thing, like if you do, and like if anyone does ever find themselves in that kind of situation, even just for yourself, like if you just like, I want to write a novel this year, that's my goal.
Yeah.
Even if all you can do, because remember, your first draft doesn't have to be good.
No.
So if all you can do is just basically go, I'm just going to write, I'm just going to write as many lines today as I can until I hit one page. And like,
I'm happy you're saying that because I know you probably get it as well. I get it all the time. It's like, oh, Ralph, I want to be a writer. What do I do? And I'm like, write. And then they look at me like I'm being a gatekeeper. I'm like, no, if you're not writing, you're not moving forward. If you're not writing, you're not getting better. If you're not writing, but I don't think the advice ever sits the way it should,
Yeah, I mean, I think like some people process that information differently. So like, I think like the way I sort of, I usually ask them like, do you want to know how to build the strength to do it?
Yeah.
Or do you want to know how to apply the strength? And that sort of comes
Those
from
are
my
both
personal.
good questions.
Well, yeah, like I mean, in another life, I used to be a PT, and that was what I sort of realized a lot of people get stuck on. It's like, how do I get to this thing? And it's like, oh, exercise consistently, at least 3 days a week. But the question is, what they're asking is sort of like, what do I do once I get to the gym? And it's sort of a similar thing, like, what do I do once I get to the page?
Yep.
And it's like, okay. And that's where like channels like yours come in handy. Like people kind of go, okay, what do I do? And you're like, all right, well, when you talk to people, like when you're talking to your characters in your head or you're thinking of the story, for me, it usually starts off as a splash blurb, like a movie synopsis.
Yeah.
And that's
I know
how
what
it
you're
usually
talking about.
yeah, and I'll just start writing the movie synopsis.
Yeah.
And then eventually the movie synopsis turns into the characters talking. And then you just sort of keep going. And then after that, you start having like a little bit of and then this is going to lead to this, and this is going to lead to this, this is going to lead to this. And that is how you start.
It's
and
funny
then
that
eventually
you're saying that as well, because I just did my last video on TikTok, which was let me see, who are you writing for? Why are you writing? What are you writing? And then somebody had asked me the question of, because what I said is like, when you're writing, you just need to write. I don't care if you're writing a laundry list, whatever it is, you need to write it. And somebody was like, well, can you give us an example? And I'm like, okay, so now I've been working on that video. That's going to be the next one, where I give the example of, it's the whole concept of you write something down, like you write spaghetti, and spaghetti might lead to spaghetti monster, and spaghetti monster might lead to meatball cannon, and but you need to write it down.
Yeah. And it's also one of these things I think is better to write something, whether it be typing or physically writing.
Yeah.
But like it needs to be created and manifested in a way that you can step back and observe it.
Oh, definitely.
And then pick it apart. Whereas I think if people just do it in their head, because also, like, I don't know about other people, but I process through talking. So a lot of the time I'll have an idea, and then when I go and talk to my wife about it, and I'll be like, I've got this idea. And then as I'm talking about it, I'll start suddenly realizing all these other things that attach to it, because now I'm processing it on a different level. And then I'll come back and I'll look at it on the paper, and I'll process it with a different part of my brain as well, and other stuff will unpack. And so, yeah, putting it into as many different mediums as you can works for me. Getting it, like even drawing little pictures of it, little doodles on napkins, like getting every single part of you to kind of come in as a full team on this thing.
And it's funny that you're saying that as well, because a while back, a friend of mine did this whole a tier on his Kickstarter where you come in and play your character, so one of the characters from one of your creations in this game. It was a one shot, and again, D&D is a great form of seeing things. So what ended up happening was I played my character in person, and it gave me so much new insight to the character itself as I was playing them. Because now you're the character, and you're seeing things differently because you're putting yourself in the character's place, and all of a sudden you start getting these new, fresh ideas. And that's why I tell people D&D is amazing for, if you want to be a writer, D&D is great. You want to be an actor, D&D is great. You want to socialize, D&D is great.
Yeah, it's great. It's like it's collective hallucination with your friends. It's fantastic.
It's like playing imaginary, which people always get upset at you, not when you do as an adult now.
Imagination play. It's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, let's face it. Like everyone in the world, like I don't think they realize like all the fun stuff that they do comes from people just playing imaginary.
Oh, definitely.
And so, so I look at like I think like the there's so many different things that they can do. One of them is like take a character and try to write just write one line from a character or one little conversational blurb, and then try to give it a different voice.
Yep.
And then, that sort of stuff. And like when people start getting to a point where they're like, oh, I feel comfortable with that, stuff just starts unlocking. And then eventually they've got this flow where they're just like, oh, yeah, I can do this. And the beginning thing is sort of like, at the beginning, it's kind of like, how do you do the bench press? Yeah. How do you do the leg press? How often should you do it? When should you try to do something heavier? Like, how long should you rest for between it? Like all these things, and like how do you breathe? Like literally, how do you physically breathe while you're under pressure? And like so, like all this stuff is like it's the same thing for writing. Like, how does your writing breathe? Like, how do you set stakes? How do you put the character under pressure? How do you have a language with it? And so, like, I think like that's a really, I mean, literally all anyone has to do is pick one of those things and focus on it, and then eventually
it gives you a whole other way to think about it.
Yeah, and then like eventually you get to a point where you're starting to get excited about it. You're like, oh, I got this really cool idea. Oh, I'm gonna make this guy like this. And it's like, oh, I got this thing. And like, you know, I was watching a detective show the other day, and I was just like, oh, that's a really cool concept. Like, you know, that's a really cool idea, the way that they did this, this, and this.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, I'm just gonna write that on a little post-it note, stuff it in my overfull drawer of ideas and like little inspiration points. And then eventually at some point you're like, go through that drawer and you're like, oh yeah, like I do need a character to fill this spot. Hang on, if I take this note from this detective thing and this note from this like action hero movie and this one over here, and I kind of merge those voices together, and I like take this part of this and this and this, and like that gives me a new character that's going to fill that black spot that I can't really fit. I've got this empty spot in my head that I can't fill in with an inspirational point. So like you fill the inspiration with other stuff, and then eventually, you know, it becomes that'll sort of initially be like a fill-in, and then eventually as you work their voice more, you'll be like, oh no, here's their thing, actually it's over here a bit more. Like
and then you know, a lot of people always like come to me and they're like, well, how do you do it? Well, mine's is different though, because they don't shut up. They just keep talking until I do what I'm supposed to be doing. Those voices from the characters, they're continually doing something in my head. So
yeah, you got to write it down, otherwise they won't shut up.
Oh my god,
you got to get them out.
See, you know what I'm talking about, and because people always ask me, if you're not publishing, why are you writing? I'm like, well, I gotta make them shut up. They need to stop. Yeah, see, you get it.
I get it.
And it's funny because I started the reason I started the Written Writ was because I started reading all this stuff, all the how to write books. Then I got to the end of it where you sit there and you got all this knowledge and you're sitting there and you're going, okay, so now what do I do now? And I realized that a lot of people, they kind of mention this, but they don't really get into it. There's this journey to becoming a writer that you're supposed to take, but nobody really talks about it, you know, because it's a personal journey and it's hard to explain that journey to anybody because, you know, you can't really give them examples of anything. It's just a journey that they have to undertake in order to become the writer. But it's very difficult to explain that journey. You can give them all the bits and pieces of how to write, but to explain that you need to now sit there, which is why I tell people you need to start writing, because what happens when you start writing is that you see what kind of writer you are. You see, like you were talking before, you're a character writer, or you're a plot writer, or you'll see what your writing is the more you do it. Even if you're writing stupid shit, you'll see stuff like that. Even if you're writing journal entries, you'll see, you know, what it is. The more you write, the better understanding of writing you get. And the whole reason for the show was that I was like, well, why don't we do this? Me and you and I take this journey together to become better writers. So I'll bring you along my journey, and hopefully that journey will help you. And that's how this whole thing started. 2,000 years ago. Well, almost 10 years ago. Oh, man. But it's been a fun journey, and I can tell you love it. AZ, you there? Did I lose AZ? Have I been talking to myself this whole time? Or is it that I'm off the air? No, I'm still on the air. Well, folks, as we wait for AZ to come back, I will keep saying what I was just saying. It's just this journey of writing that you need to figure out for yourself. You need to figure out what it is, what kind of writer you are, why are you writing, what are you writing. All that stuff comes together, and it builds into the writer that you will become. You need to find your voice in writing, and I know that a lot of people say that, and it's kind of like an abstract idea, but this voice of yours starts to happen. There you go. You're back.
Sorry, the batteries ran out in my headset that I was walking.
Okay. Well, the good thing is I was talking about something that I could expand on. So
sorry about that.
I don't know. It was the right time because I just went down this whole journey with the whole thing. But that's the whole reason why I started doing the Written Writ, was because I realized there's this journey that needs to happen, and people need to take it. And you can't become a writer until you take it.
Yeah, absolutely. From the parts that I heard before I ran off to go and fetch another headset.
You know, AZ's gonna be doing like you guys are gonna let's rewatch that and see what we're up to.
Oh man, I was just sitting there like, oh yeah, cool, and then I'm like, wait, my thing's not moving. like, no, oh no, classic. But yeah, no, I think ultimately, if you know, you have to sort of have your own sort of little journey.
Yeah.
Like I have a few bigger novels that I was writing before I started into comic world.
Right.
And then and yeah, like, you know, they're still there, and I'm still like probably looking to, you know, eventually get them put through their final drafts and then set out there. But yeah, like initially, like the idea of like demoted superheroes and getting into comics was so that I could have something a little less large,
right,
to cut my teeth on. And that was the mistake I made, because comics are fucking huge. But
it's so funny. You know what it is? It's that we've gotten to this point now where we start to believe people because they belittle comics. They make it lesser of, but it's still the same production. You're still doing this writing, you know, and you start to believe that writing is shit writing. I mean, if comics is shit writing, then you know you're doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah, I mean, like any medium, like I would say comics in writing are no more shit than some comics in novels.
Exactly.
Like it really sort of comes down to like whether or not someone is a good writer or not.
Right.
But I think when it comes to, like, I mean, there's something to be said where, you know, you're doing a medium where you're trusting that all of the background narration you'd usually put in is just going to be handled by visuals, and you know that it's going to translate well. And that was one of those things where I was like, okay, first few pages I had a really clear insight onto, but unlike writing where you can kind of do it discovery style, you can't really do that with comics. Because like you can if you're a good script writer, you can kind of be like, oh yeah, you can do it at the script level, but you can't be like creation level.
You know, the only time people see that is when somebody sees the script. You know, because you're, you know, and at the same time, you're not really getting in depth like you are when you're writing a novel where you're explaining everything. You might explain a couple things to the artist, but then it's up to the artist to figure out how to take or the script you're writing and make it into a story. Even though you can give them like some kind of ideas, but you know, in the end, it's their art that kind of like puts it all together.
Yeah, it's a lot more like what's the name of it? Used in movies and TV series, the
storyboard.
Not a storyboard. The style of script they use specifically. I have it on the tip of my tongue, but yeah, when you're writing specifically for stuff like that, like where the camera angles being sort of discussed and all this stuff, like that's really sort of like, so anyone who hasn't seen a comic book script, like a good comic book script and a good writer will sort of have that sort of involvement in it. Like you really are more of a director than anything else.
Know exactly what you're talking about. I had to do this when I was in college. It's part of the storyboarding process, but it's that in-between phase where like you have each scene and how you gotta compose the angles.
Yeah.
And right, like that one, right?
Yeah, and you have to, well, exactly, and you sort of have to, you're doing all of this by text, and you have to do it in a way that it's sort of like you're also writing what would be the paragraph, like Jack and Jill then tripped over a stone and plummeted down the side of the hillside. The look on Jack's face was filled with shock and horror, and as his head cracked against the stone, and Jill, you know, scrambled to try not to slip, but fell anyway. And it's like you kind of have, so the stuff that you'd kind of have, you still have to write that in a way that inspires a visual for the person. So it is kind of still novel writing. But then at the same time, you're writing prompts under it, like the camera angle is looking at it from an overview, looking at a slight tilt as if it's spinning the world on its side, you know, this and this and that. And you kind of like, so you're a director with the camera at the same time as being a novelist with an inspirational sort of direction for it. And then under that, you're putting like sound effects and you're putting like dialogue bubbles so that basically the person can be like, oh, this is the actual text that's going to go in and that has to fit here and here. So
my teachers are shaking their heads at me because I know exactly what this is, and I had to do so many of these.
There's a specific name for it in like TV media, and if someone is screaming at the screen right now, going,
like, you know they are.
Yes,
I imagine. Guys, they say they're writers.
I have these literally inside a folder right next to me right now. I know what these are. And they go for a lot of money too. Like the individual cells, it's
I'm actually picturing like Dwight Schrute, like idiot, idiot, and like just like. So I think like having so having like that style, like that, realizing like you can't sort of fly by the seat of your pants on every single thing with that, because like you're really sort of going like, okay, you can do the first splash, but you got to sort of run through. And like that's where I think a lot of people get tripped up, because the first time you write something in that sort of format, it usually is a bit cheesy. It is a bit more emotive. So like you're just kind of like, you'll have speech bubbles like "screw you," and like then like on your third or fourth pass, you'll kind of come back and be like, "Hang on, we now have this situation," and it's like I'm going to replace the words with like instead of the villain going like "I'm going to destroy you all," it's like, I'm done with this. You replace it with like, I'm done with this flea-infested backwater. And like, I'm going to delete everything and everyone here. And it's like, just, you now have more of an idea of how it's meant to end, of how each character is meant to be fleshed out, what's meant to be the thing. Like, who are the characters? What insults will land better? Like, what feels like, with these new insults and new lines, like what reaction seems fair and measured. And so like that's one thing I'd sort of say to everybody is just like if you're a bit unsure how to write, try writing a 25-page script and then just like give that a go. As far as comic writers, like after working with lots and lots and lots of comic writers out there in studios, I would say like if you're out there and you're about to do a big adventure, try to keep your thing down to maybe like 15 to 25 pages. There is a reason, or 24. The reason being is that like people can take a chance on you. Like you can, it's really, people can kind of turn around and be like, hey, like this looks like a really fun little comic, and they want like, I don't know, $5 or $10 for it on a Kickstarter. And whereas like if you're doing like the big one, just the printing costs alone, plus you need to reimburse yourself for the time you spent doing it. I think people forget to pay themselves for the amount of time they spent too.
Oh, definitely.
And so like they're kind of like
doing everything themselves.
And that's the thing. So it's sort of like, look, if you want to make another comic, you want to sort of be able to take the money you made from this comic and use it to invest in to make the second chapter. Then like you want to basically have it priced in a way that you can do that. And so like learn from my mistake and don't go bolting out the gate with a 48-page comic. Like I've seen some people come out with like 80 and 90-page comics.
Right.
Those are hard sells, because those things are like almost $100, and like a lot of them are hardcover when they start getting up around that level, and the postage to ship them off is a lot. And so like like the people around them will 100% probably get one, but most people will kind of be like, I don't know, because that's like a lot of money. Whereas like I could buy like, $25 comics and take a chance on a whole bunch of things, and then discover the next studio I want to follow. So like it's when rocking around in indie, it's like maybe like take a chance to sort of go, when you're just starting out, like do some small shots. It also gives you a chance to cut your teeth on what sort of comics you want to create too. So you can kind of be like, I'm going to like, for me with novels, my first novels were like 400 freaking page ideas. And now I'm just like, nah, I want to do closed stories, 150, maximum 200 pages, and I want them to be a closed story by the end. And
one of the things I've done now is that instead of like working on the full thing, I'll work on scenes from whatever it is, and then as the scenes get together, then it writes the whatever I'm writing, or it'll stay as a short because I really, anytime I try to write something long form, I'm like, no. I'm gonna write the short version of it or whatever it is that I want to show off, and then I'll work on that. And as time progresses, sometimes I'll end up with seeing a bunch of scenes from the same story, and then that's what I feel like that's when it becomes all coherent and it all starts to get formed together. And I sit there going, oh look, I got a full book here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good, like, that's I think they call that discovery writing too, and that is like a really, really strong form of writing. And there's a lot of different types of ways to approach things. Like like we were sort of saying in the green room, there was like pants writing, or no pants writing, character writing, the hero's journey plot style, 3-act, which Hollywood's 3-act series, which technically is a 4-act series, but they call it 3-act. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff that like you can like even just cut your teeth until you figure out your way of doing it. And like once you figure out your way of doing it, like that's basically it. Like I sort of have like the synopsis dump, and then the synopsis dump until eventually it turns into like finding voices, and then it starts turning into extraction and plot, where it's like, oh, I want this at the end, oh, I want this halfway, oh, these are the things. Then I'm like, cool, now I start to spread those out, or almost like over a sheet. Like I'll just kind of, and if I have to, I'll do the old like detective thing, like a big piece of butcher's paper on the wall, and I'll kind of do like Jim Butcher's style. Like I don't know if you read much Jim Butcher. And so what he'll do, Jim Butcher basically does like imagine the shape of a rainbow, but he'll just draw a big line. And then he's like, okay, then up in the middle, he's like, this is the peak of the story. And then this is where it all progresses, or down one side is where it's all falling apart and like tumbling to the end. And then it's built, and the other side, it's all building up to the peak, the big action point. And that's pretty much how all of his stories work. And I'm like, hey, he does well. And it's like, he knows how to do that really, really well. And like, so if whatever it is, like if you find your version of it.
Because what you need to do is figure out how to break it down to its basic self so that you can build it back up.
Yeah. And it's like, and it's also a good way to keep things on a line. Like he does do versions where it's got like several lines going through it, and one will be the villain. And it's like, where during this time of the story where this character's doing this, what's the villain doing? And then like, oh, what if his side character's doing? Like, and then it might be like one of them's just the entire time like drinking coffee at work, and then suddenly like they're like, oh, got a call from the main character, jump in here. And like it's so like if you need more visual lines like that can be a way to do it.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I ultimately think at the end of it, without having some kind of way for you to disseminate everything, it can wander a little bit. And I know I'm terrible for that. So one of the ways I try to do it, and like I was saying earlier on in the show, was like keeping to the floor and keeping relevant to the floor. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So let's say, for instance, if the characters, and again, just so a good piece of advice is that the floor should always be something that can be resolved. There was a writing lecturer that I watch occasionally. I can't remember the name of him. I think it's Brandon is his first name. Brandon Sullivan, maybe not. Don't quote me on that. But like,
I went looking for this Brandon Sullivan, Mr. AZ, and I never found him.
Now I'm just like, oh, I really should bring up the YouTube
I think it was Written Writ Ralph. I'm pretty sure it was Written Writ Ralph. Exactly. There is no other. Hang on, I'm just gonna find out. I hate quoting things and not giving. Brandon Sanderson. Sorry, Brandon. So basically. Very nice. He's a great one. It's like, so basically, the floor should relate to, and there's another book I read recently on writing called Take Your Pants Off, which is a character writing thing. And so basically, both of them have quoted this before, where it's like, and so I'll quote them again. And
effectively, like, let's say, for instance, and I'm just paraphrasing here, but let's say, for instance, your flaw is something like, if you go to create something like, oh, their eyes are green and everyone hates people with green eyes, that's not a really good character flaw. That's a good character quirk.
Just for context, what exactly is a flaw in this context?
Yeah, so basically that's where this is sort of building to. So basically, what you want to do with a flaw is have something that can be resolved.
Yeah.
It's the easier way to do it. So a flaw should be something that the character, it's preventing the character from getting to their ultimate goal. And this is an external goal. So the external goal is something like, I want to be the ultimate champion of my region in, hero actions or whatever it's going to be. I want to be the best. I want to be the best of the best, but exactly. I can't because I'm a complete asshole. And because I'm an asshole, nobody wants to vote me up to be this guy. And so what it is like that him being an asshole is the flaw. Yeah. And so he can't get to that point because no one will support him in that journey. No one will vote for him to enter the competition. And so basically then you need the actioning ally. So the actioning ally doesn't have to be a friend. It's just someone who causes the action for this person to learn not to be an asshole. And then the actual journey is them, like the journey's arc is when their flaw is gone. They might not even enter that contest. They might enter the contest. They might enter the contest and win, or they might choose to reject that contest by realizing, actually, I'm going to be a sociable person and I'm going to be a hero in another way. Yeah. And I get to the end. And they might even fail, but it's all good. The whole point is that's the journey. They might not, they might get to a point where they almost learn not to be an asshole, but then they choose to continue to be an asshole, but they're not worried about.
Yeah, those are all resolutions and stories. Yep.
Yeah. So it's like basically at the end of the day, that's the story arc thing. So being able to like break things down in a way so that you can make sure that your story, because like, let's face it, him interacting with someone on the bus on the way to work, where he's learning and gritting his teeth, trying not to be an asshole, and even stopping being like, then he also goes to the shopping center and a kid loses a balloon, and where he'd usually laugh, he like grabs the balloon down for the kid and hands it to them. Those are relevant. Him going and getting coffee, where he doesn't interact and doesn't have anything, or him like missing the bus, isn't relevant because it has nothing to do with whether or not he is acting as an asshole or not acting as an asshole, which has to do with his flaw. Right. And so basically that's how we, as these ADHD deep dreamers who want to run off on every tangent, stay on track and finish a goddamn story. It's like we basically go, is what I'm about to write relevant to the flaw that needs to be a part of this arc?
But it's funny that you're saying all this, because as DMs, it's almost the complete opposite. Because you're writing a story, but at the same time, you're writing a story in a way where you're writing everything about the story, but almost not. It's almost like you're writing everything about the story, but you're not writing the story.
Well, the way that I sort of do GMing is a little bit similar to character writing. So like the way that I sort of do that situation is one where I'll walk in and I'll go, okay, like I have an idea of the world, but I'm not going to keep fleshing it out until people actually have to engage with it. What I'll do is I'll throw like maybe one or two elements around and I'll let their imaginations fill in the rest, because they can do a way better job than I can do like one piece at a time.
That's why I tell people all the time that it's important, especially when they're playing Dungeons and Dragons, to flesh out their own characters, because the DM will take a lot of that stuff that you're fleshing out. And that's what I'm saying. I know a lot of people think that's not important, what their character is doing, who their character is. But it's a better story if the DM can take your character and flesh them into the story. So if you give the DM, the more you give the DM, the better it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, so yeah, if someone turns around and goes like I always ask every single character that comes to my table, every player, I ask them what their flaw is. Yep. And I'm like, we're not entering this character into the game until you tell me a flaw. And, basically I have had some players who are a bit more power gamey who'll just be like, no, my flaw is that, I'm like, okay. I'm like, I'll usually turn around and be like, okay, like what do you do for relaxing? And I'll find the thing that they do for fun. Right. And then build the floor around it. And so it's like, okay, they're like, what do you do? I was like, I drink and I sleep with, whores at the tavern, and I shoot guns. And I'm like, great. Okay. You're lecherous. And it's like, that's your flaw.
You sure you don't mean American?
Hey, we're still just as lecherous down here. It's like, I resemble that remark now.
Exactly.
You resemble.
But yeah, the basically having yeah, it's sort of like one of those things where, you know, if someone hasn't got a flaw in their character, maybe it's because they're scared. They might have had a GM that sort of like beat them around the head with like any weakness.
Yeah,
and
I've
like
seen it. Yeah.
yeah, so like what I'll usually do is just sort of point out this is where the fun's going to come from. So like if your character is an a-hole, or you know, your character is like a penny pincher, or your character is like, you know, they're maybe they're just like I had one character that like it's a part of the one of the racial species I had where they're nomadic, and so wherever they are, they treat as their home, completely their home. And which
That's a good
creates a
flaw.
lot of fun because basically they'll turn up and just start helping themselves to things as if it's their house. Now the other side of
I've
it
had
as well
characters
is
like
that,
that. Yeah.
and the other side of it as well though is that they also can't bear to stay somewhere for more than one night. And so basically, if the entire party's like, we're going to stay here and we're going to camp out for the next week and work on our potions, and it's like, well, you guys are, but that guy's not. And like that guy over there goes on his own little side quest, and a lot of the time they have to go and find him and dig him out and all this other stuff. And so that technically is a character flaw. Is just like you have wandering syndrome. Like you cannot, you don't regard other people's property and privacy, and you have no consideration for other people's need to rest. Yeah. Like you just basically have this real selfish aspect to yourself that you don't even consider selfish, because it's ingrained as a real selfless part of your community. Like
what
for your
part,
part,
that's the main character of every video game. What are you talking about?
Oh,
that's
you
what
saw
Link
through
does
it.
all the time. Crash, crash, crash. Link, stop breaking those things.
Or like, as I like to call them, walking 2-year-olds. It's like basically, I'm just gonna punch this guy in the face.
Oh my gosh.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
Link isn't a 2-year-old.
Oh, dude, man,
the more I've
I
become,
always wonder because Link just walks into houses and starts breaking jars, and I'm like, Link, what the hell are you doing?
yeah, as parenthood has really taught me that, like, yeah, a lot of the big protagonist energy is just basically summarized by, you know, the terrible twos.
Yes, it is.
It's you know, I'm just gonna scream and I'm gonna throw, and now you pick me up, but I don't want to be picked up yet, but I asked for it, but now I'm gonna punch you, and now put me down, and now hug me. And it's like,
which is also a lot of cat energy.
Oh yeah, right. So yeah, it's yeah, so like I think basically yeah, like if I could say one thing for people, like with Mike Tenner, like one of the things that he sort of got me thinking on was like, if you look through a lot of the stories that he writes, he leads into reluctant heroes. So a lot of the heroes are reluctant heroes.
Yeah.
And for me, I like because that's a great way to write. It's like you're watching a person compelled forward through reluctance and like not wanting to be there, and that's the thing they're overcoming, is like how to work through that. And that was really cool. Like, but one of the I sort of found for myself, I'm like you'll probably see with Punky, there's a little bit of reluctant hero in there, but ultimately, like, I really sort of like, especially with the villains and stuff, I like the flaw thing. And that's because I was working very heavily with Hypergeist, so there's a bit of that bleed through of like this writing style kind of bled through. Whereas with Nevermore and Trapdoor and some of these other comics, they're a lot more based around the sort of flaw system. Like, it's like I really sort of spent a lot more time like actually reading a lot of books. Like we had the cyclone hit here in Australia a while ago, and it didn't do too much damage to anyone. Luckily, like some people did get hit pretty hard. For myself, structurally, house is fine. We're all happy. We're all healthy. What it did do, however, is have me reading by torchlight for over a week.
You need to read by torchlight.
Yeah, I'm loving LED torches, by the way. Like, I just had that thing on like almost 24/7. I'm like, oh my! I remember back in the day, you used to have to change those batteries every day. Like, you could have the torch on for 3 hours and it'd be dead. And like now, it's just like an LED torch. You can just keep it going forever. So I just sat there by torchlight, just like reading all of these like books I had on writing, and it really just made me like chew the hell out of like some of these newer scripts that I'm making, and I just went like, yeah, like I have such a better insight onto what I want to do now, and so Nevermore, I'm really, it's almost like I'm so pumped to write that one just for the visuals.
I can tell though, because when you were describing it before, I was like, whoa.
It's like, I just even love the idea, like even, and it's Nevermore isn't going to be a story that's sort of, it's going to have this issue and this issue and this issue. It's like, no, I just want to write Nevermore.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit like they wrote, when you just, any sort of closed volume. I just want to sort of create a single closed volume story. Someone can be like, hey, I want to read this. And it's like, yeah, that's it. That's the story. And then if people,
right there.
and if people are like, oh, I want to read it again, I want to read more of it. And it's like, okay, then I guess I'll do another Nevermore comic, but it's not going to be the same Restless Soul. It's not going to be the same person coming out of limbo. And so, yeah.
I was going to say that I got to tell people, that if they're looking for a simple way to understand the hero's journey, you can, there's a Bluey episode where the mom actually breaks down the hero's journey in such a simplistic way that it makes it so simple for people to like take in. And it's an episode of Bluey. I forgot the name of the episode, and it's one of my favorite episodes. And she does the whole hero's journey, because she's explaining it to Bluey, and Bingo is off with the father on a quest, and that's how they explain the whole thing, by what Bingo's doing with her father.
Wait, is this the one where they have to go and exchange the curries?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, love.
Yeah, that is a great episode.
Yeah. Oh man, like this household has just like, we went through like months of nonstop Bluey repeat, and and it's just we got parent guilt. We were just like,
because you watch the parent, and you're like, damn. But then you think about it, these are spurts where they're doing this. That it's not like they're doing this their whole life. It's just a moment where they're doing this. I'm like, okay, I do the same thing.
Yeah, it's like someone else pointed out. It's like, well, these are only like 8-minute episodes.
Exactly.
How to explain that? So it's like, I think for me, like the big one is sort of like watching how physically active Bandit is at any given time. Like, and then it's like they do show how puffed he gets and stuff, but I'm just like, oh my god, is Bandit like this bloody athlete? Like, he's on it, man. And like,
but it's funny because as you watch the show, they explain, they kind of start going. He goes to the doctor and is like, "How are you staying fit?" And he's like pointing at the kids.
Yeah, it's so true though. Like most of it's arguably been about half a decade since I've really been in the gym. Like I used to be a personal trainer.
Mm-hmm.
I used to be a very, very healthy, very, very capable powerlifter, big guy. And then effectively health stuff hit me. Now I've found out that it was I wasn't able to break down histamine. So, we all pump out histamine when we're working out and exercising. So that wasn't great. So that's I found out what knocked me out of the gym, and now I'm able to get myself and my health back on track. And
which is always important, figuring that out.
Yeah. So now I'm at a point where I'm just like, holy crap! Like, the condition that I have in me now, these almost half a decade later, it's like that's pretty much just the kids. Like, like basically chasing the kids around, like having them chase you, like picking them up and holding them up in the air over your head and stuff. Like it very much does do a lot of that that kind of stuff. And like I think for me though, like I think like when people like it's funny, like before I had kids and people you'd always see the comments online, like people like it's not really a full-time job and this and that, and it's like and I can't and I'm kind of like, look, and I didn't really have an opinion on it either way, because I'm like, look, I don't have kids, so that's fine. I know that kids are a lot. But then, like, when you get to be a parent, and you're just like, it's this. I think for me, it's funny. When I was younger, I used to be able to go to bands, listen to really loud music and all that kind of stuff, and it didn't really do anything. And now, as an adult, I'm like, why does kids screaming over it just regulates my brain, and you just kind of, and like you put that smile on and you're just like, that's great, you're having fun, and you're just like, why is my brain melting? And it's like, and it's a good thing too, because you're like, well, I mean, them squealing and stuff means they're having fun, and I don't want to be like one of those grumpy parents who are just like, don't
Shut
make
up!
noises, don't make sounds. So I'm like, yeah, so I've just become the parent that has headphones around a lot, and I just like I'll just pop those on. And but yeah, it's definitely an eye opener. It's just like, yeah, like, you know, at any given time you're a shift worker, so you're like up multiple times through the night, and you're you know, you're there from morning, you're there through the day, and then you got to go do your other stuff. And like, I think like just, yeah, that's the big thing, is just like it's a bit of a time crunch, and it's an overstimulation. And I think if people like the rest of it, like all the rest of the stuff that people complain about, they're like, oh man, money. And I'm like, you feed yourself, you can feed them.
Yeah.
Like it's not that much of a difference. And like, you know, their tummies are small, and then, you know, by the time they're
sometimes
not small,
they're easier to feed than yourself.
I mean, honestly, like they're so picky. It's like it gets to a point where like, but I don't, you know, hey, I'm making this really nice, you know, stir fry with all this good stuff in it, and they're like, nah, chicken nuggies.
Exactly.
That's
what I'm saying.
You know,
it's like, oh, don't you worry about your kids. No, I just got to buy a bunch of chicken nuggies and we're fine.
Yeah, I rearrange my freezer. I'm just like, okay, here's all the kid-friendly vegetables in the door. Here's the oven fries. Here's the fish finger nuggies and pre-approved things.
Definitely.
You're like, okay, so half my freezer is just like all this pre-approved stuff. Got it. And then and I'll always put something, like anything I'm making, I'll put on their plate and just be like, try a little bit of this, and like try to sort of wean them across. But I tell
my daughter all the time, like you try it, you don't like it, you don't have to eat it. Boom, that's it.
Exactly. And it's like, you know, at the end of the day, like I also have to remember that their taste buds are like so much more intense than ours are. So at the end of the day, like, you know, we're sitting there going,
because there's a ton of stuff I like now that I would never have liked as a kid.
Oh, even just tomatoes. I couldn't eat tomatoes.
Oh my God. Yeah.
But yeah, and that's the sort of fun stuff, like, to sort of, so we don't go too far off on tangent, I guess. That's the sort of fun stuff that, you know, for example, you can write into characters. There we go. I brought it back.
That's what I tell people all the time, that you know, because people make writing into this big obstacle, and I'm like, and I tell people all the time, writing is easy. And then some people get upset at me, but I'm like, no, but writing is easy. You know, you being able to write is an easy thing, because there's so much you can write about. There's so much out there that you can just put down on paper. Becoming a writer is a whole other thing, which means that you're making your levels as you become the writer, which you do as you write.
Yeah, and that's the thing though. It's like, I think, you know, so many people want to put the cart before the horse, and they're like, how will I promote this? How will I do this? How will I do that? And it's like, man, don't worry about that until you're at the bridge. Like,
exactly.
Just at the moment,
finish the project first.
Yeah, and it's like, and honestly, like, if you get the truth is though, if you overload your brain with too much stress, worrying about like, can I, will I, won't I, what'll happen, it's like, dude, you're not going to write it. Like, actually, just here's the thing as well. Like, at the end of the day, you can, every day you go to work, you know, if you put a few dollars aside, like, literally might just be $5 at the end of the week, and then you go, okay, I'm just going to focus on writing, and then when it gets to having to do marketing and publicity, I'm just going to take whatever's in my piggy bank and go, someone else can fucking do that.
Exactly.
Like, I mean, it's like, I'm not that guy. And like, I mean, like, you'll notice, like, I am just terrible at my social medias. Like, I'm just not that guy. Like, I do kind of try. I get on there, but I kind of end up falling back into like, oh, I post maybe a couple of times on Facebook. And then everyone's like, oh, what about Instagram? I'm like, I have one sometimes. How's your TikTok? I posted on it 3 years ago. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you were doing pretty good, and then you stopped. I was like, okay.
Yeah, and it's like, honestly, like, it's not too bad. Like, it hasn't dropped off too much, but like, I think it happens when, like, you know, you do get to a point where you start hyper focusing on the craft.
Yeah.
And you do realize, like, this is actually what I need to be doing.
Yeah.
And like, you know, when I first started, like when I was doing all the challenges, it was like, oh, okay, like I was moving across from illustrative work and I was starting to move into comic work, because I really asked myself during lockdown, what do I actually want from life? And I wanted to at least be involved somewhat in comics. And so I started doing it. And then when I started doing, like, you know, I first started out by going like, hey, here's what I can do. And just starting to like interact with people and be like, hey, I exist and this is what I can do. And then, you know, you do get to a point where you're like, oh, I need to actually do the job now. Okay. And then, you know, you're starting like, you know, at a certain, like you're saying, at a certain point, you just got to write, or you've just got to draw. And
you just got to do it. You got to sit down and do it. You got to buckle down and do it. You got to, and And the biggest thing is this: if you don't write it, you don't know what you did wrong or right.
Yeah, and if you're not writing it, you're already failed. And if
Exactly.
you don't try, it's like I think there's a lot that can go into it, and like studying psychology as well has sort of given me a lot of insight into the anxiety spectrum side of things.
Yeah.
Like, and I think a lot of us kind of get wrapped up in it. Like a lot of it, I know for myself, I'm one of those people that struggles with dopamine. So
Yeah.
that's the go button. So like for me, it's
Yeah.
like I had to figure out my own unique particular way to hack that. And yeah, so like for myself, I like green, so I made a little corner in my house where it's like I tried doing real plants. That's a bad time for the real plants. So I bought fake plants and I just stuck fake plants everywhere. I put bookshelves everywhere. I put my books on them. I put my stuff on them.
I gotta say, that's one of those things that get you going. Like a nice bunch of books on a bookshelf.
You got to
It's
do
a nice little thing.
Yeah, and it's like it's what works for you. Like you got to kind of work in, like all that stuff behind you brings you joy.
Yeah.
So it's like stuff that like you kind of go when you walk in, you see it, and your brain goes yay, and that little bit of yay is what you need to just kick that engine over.
Oh, dude,
like,
that's why like when I was watching Beauty and the Beast and he gave her the library, I was like, oh.
Oh my god! Someone said it perfectly the other day. Like I was they were just like, oh, like if you ever feel guilty about buying books but never reading them, don't, because what you're actually doing is creating a little bank account filled with future dopamine hits. So like when you're feeling like really, really low, because let's face it, when you're low, you want a good book to read if that's your thing, but you can't get the energy to go out and buy one, let alone research which ones are good. So if you suddenly get a really big hit of like, this is great, and like you stick it on the shelf. And then when you're like, oh, I need something great, take one of those little pre-packaged, pre-approved hits of dopamine off the shelf and like flick through a few pages. And so like once I stopped feeling guilty about hoarding, having my little dragon hoard of like books and musical instruments and all kinds of stuff. Like I just I used to be like, oh, but what if I don't play it like more than once a year? It's like, doesn't matter. Did it make your brain go yay? And then you could do the things you needed to. Then that's all you need. And that's so like it's like yeah, and it's like so when it comes to writing, I think like you need to be able to firstly kick the brain over, and like a lot of that is just getting anxiety out of the way. And so remember that like I'd say to people, just the first draft is meant to be absolute pile of horse garbage. So just don't.
You're supposed to be throwing this stuff together and figuring it out. And then you leave it alone for a little while, because what we do is sometimes we jump right into it. No, leave it alone. Let it sit there for a while. Because that way, when you come back, you have a fresh mind to it, and then you start pulling it apart and you start rewriting certain things because they sound better, or no, this makes more sense than that, or I don't think I should work this part of the story. Editing is important as well, and self-editing is a big thing. Yeah,
and even inspiration things like like basically getting off your beaten path. Even like if you can't go outside, let's say you just like I've been like sometimes just bedbound, and you just like it was like that for months. So I'm like, my version of getting off the beaten path was just like, hey, I don't usually watch these types of movies. I'm just going to literally scroll down the page, close my eyes, and point at the screen. Okay, that's my walk down a path I don't usually do. And then suddenly you're introduced to characters you wouldn't, and scenarios and scenes you wouldn't, and you see camera angles you wouldn't, and it just gets your brain percolating a little differently. And then when you go back to writing something, you can kind of be like, actually, I want this whole town to feel differently. I want it to feel like that weird rom-com that I watched. And then here's this other town, and I want that to feel like this gothic, dark horror that I watched. And it's like, cool. And so like you have this like different version, and like your real life version, which is probably a lot healthier, is actually just, hey, I don't usually go to this beach or this area. I'm going to find a cafe in there. Or I'm going to go shopping in a different shopping center and pick up groceries somewhere slightly different. I'm going to go to a butcher.
Jiggle things up.
Yeah, and every time you sort of interact with people, you're adding archives of stuff to your writer's library. So like, suddenly like you're like, oh, it's just a matter of slowing down. And I think our brains are so bombarded by absolute metric tons of conversation and information that like we've just sort of grown a little bit like white noise numb. But like if you actually like sort of stop, breathe, and just be in the moment with stuff around you, like really take into account like what is the like how cold is the floor in the butchers, like what types of meat are on the shelves, why are the priced meats sort of in certain places, like who are the people behind the counter, what do they look like, what are their expressions like, how
That's
do they
all important,
sound?
yeah.
And like, yeah, it's like these are the things that make you a writer. It's like being able to translate that really well. And because remember, it's a show don't tell game most of the time, not all the
Yeah.
time, but most of the time. And so, you know, basically, if you can kind of show how that would work, then yeah, you're going to be in a situation where, you know, you can build these kinds of things very quickly. You can abbreviate them down to like 25 pages and make something really captivating. And yeah, you'll be able to sort of figure out how to visually direct somebody who's coming in to help you with that project as well. You'll be able to say like, no, I really need this, like this, and this. Thank you, please. Love you very much. You know, ta-da. And like,
There you go.
yeah, there we go. Yay. Whereas if you sort of go like, I can't really, express or understand why this isn't feeling well. And a lot of it's just because your archive might be a bit locked behind all the noise of the world around you at the time. And that's where, I've sort of found myself caught a lot of the time. So like, yeah, as far as like how to start, I would be like, yeah, if they're still having trouble, even just trying to write, maybe just have a look at the psychology of yourself at the time. And like, are you stressed? Are you locked down? Like, are you needing to just be able to physically breathe and unlock the body and kind of be like, hang on, I'm not hearing my community in my head. I'm not hearing the people.
That's why I say journals are important, and it's another important part of writing, because sometimes that journal will help you fix something that will allow you to write.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like more often than not. And like I even if you never look inside that dragon pile of like information, you might still get to a point where it's like that dragon pile is still building new little pathways of ideas in your brain that'll pop up when you need them later. And so, yeah, it's a huge thing.
Folks, I hope you guys have been enjoying this. It's already the 2-hour mark. Can you believe that we've been talking for 2 hours? I can't believe it. Dude, we cover so many topics today. So AZ, tell the people one more time where they can find you. I'll put up your stuff. And
absolutely.
There we go.
Absolutely. Look, easy place to find me. If you don't want to listen to me ramble and rant and all that kind of stuff, I would suggest the Substack. You just click subscribe and you'll get wonderful little pictures and updates on what's happening to me and the comics and stories and books that I'm writing in your email, and you won't have to deal with hearing my voice ever again. If you want to come and listen to my dulcet tones yammer on and create games and listen to me and watch me draw pictures and deal with my never-ending tangents, feel free to come over onto Discord. I am looking to try and jump on there at least once or twice a week while I do work, and you guys can come along and get sneak peeks into some of the other studios' works as I create them, and you can also watch me play some games with my friends and watch me torment them and hopefully not make them cry, but I can never tell sometimes. But again, that's something that you can feel free to pop on and have a bit of a social time with me if you like. I am out there. If you just Google Asvault, I've managed to infect the internet, so you can find me on TikTok,
it's easy
Facebook.
to find you too.
It is. I feel sorry for the actual businesses out there who have Asvault related names. I've bumped them well and truly off the algorithm. But yes, you can find me pretty much anywhere. Facebook is a strong place where I usually do a lot of socializing. But again, in just the interest of connecting with me as an artist, Discord and Substack will be the two big places over the next year.
And folks, you really got to check him out because he has a lot of things planned for the future. I'm looking forward to this. I've been looking forward to it for a while. And I can see he's coming to the end of the journey where he'll begin to show all this stuff off.
Yes. I mean, I've been doing some great work with Donnie on Punky, and that should be really popping up within the next couple of months. You should actually start to see things like the launch of the Kickstarter for that one.
Oh, dude, definitely we're gonna bring you on the show so you can do all that stuff with the Kickstarter.
I'm gonna have to censor so many pages.
You don't have to censor. Just send them all to me. For reasons.
Of course, I know you'll do the appropriate censorship and thoroughly appreciate them. I mean, like, let's face it, leotards aren't combat effective outfits, but that's the nature of the 80s aesthetic of the whole thing. So yeah,
dude, people were wearing that stuff everywhere. They were doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing in the leotard. So it makes sense.
Man. But that's the thing. That was the whole thing at the time. I was, at the time, it was the thing. So yeah, actually having that be the nature of the outfit and the nature of everything. I mean, punky is one of those things where it's a don't take me seriously. This is a 100% a cheeseball spoof, and
fun. Yeah.
In nature of the 80s, and just let's say 80s, 90s.
You sold me ages ago. Just the 80s alone, I'll be like, dude.
Oh, really? Like, honestly though, like, it's been so much fun to kind of go into it, and like, it's just the first comic is just going to be like a whole bunch of splash action and like kind of getting into like the cheesiness of it, and then depending on how the audience wants, because really it comes down to the audience. If they want me to keep doing the story, then happily I will, and I'm happy to keep going back to Donnie and getting him to keep cranking out.
You folks better be making him do that story because it looks good and it looks like a lot of fun.
Well, that's the big thing with indie comics that I think that there's a cultural difference between commercial comics and indie comics. Not to go off on too much of a bigger tangent for you, but the one thing I'd say with the two different writing styles that the audience probably need to understand is that, like, with commercial comics, you can kind of just tune in when you want, and it will just keep going. Like, it's got it's got Disney money, man. Like, it'll just keep churning out. And like, the artists in there are very well taken care of, and everything is very well taken care of. With indie comics though, like, one failed launch anywhere along the storyline,
oh my god, yeah,
the whole thing grinds to a halt.
Yep.
And
then
that's
you never see it again. Yeah.
And so it really does come.
It's
not even a matter of like
to support indies.
Well, that's just it though, and it's like, it's something that, like, even for myself, like, the hardest part is like when you've been as involved in indies as myself, you meet all these wonderful people. They're not like faceless people anymore. They're your friends, and they're your community. They're the people you wake up every day and you see their families posted around, and you care about it, and then you're like, holy crap! Like, I'm a starving artist. Like, I can't just buy every single. And the hard part as well is I'm in Australia, so like, oh yeah, it's a $15 comic, but it's like $45 postage.
Oh
and
my
you're
god!
Like, and
yeah,
it's like,
that stuff has gone crazy, man.
It's a bit nuts. So yeah,
horrible.
so like literally, and I'm a big fan of paperback comics. So like, for me, it's like, I will. If I've got the money, I'll try and get even just digital copies.
Yeah.
And just sort of being like, all right, like, I do want to support. Give me the art. Give me the digital. Yeah. So like, for anyone who's kind of like, okay, like, I don't know how I can support it, even just downshifting into like, I can't get the paper one, but I will get this other one.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, even with indies, like, feel free to reach out to the artists or feel free to reach out to the creators and just be like, hey man, like, I can only get the digital version. Can I buy this cover off you from this artist? Or go to the artist and be like, can I buy that variant cover off you or something? Like, what can I do? And a lot of the time, people will actually just be like, yeah, of course. Like, we want you to like and support.
Yeah.
And so like, unlike with commercials where you can't do that, you can't really be like, hey man, like, is there another way I can access this with you on a condition that kind of fits into what I can do? So like, that's the other benefit as well. But like, again, like, the real big crunch point here is like, with indie comics is if they don't hit a good launch point, because effectively what happens in this one funds the next one, then a lot of the time they'll crumble, and it sort of hits that decline very quickly. And so that's really what happens a lot with indie TV too. Like you're sort of seeing it
definitely.
where it's like, like a lot of people
With
sort of
indie
discover
everything, once you try to do it and it doesn't seem to do anything, a lot of people will just leave it alone. But at the same time, there are indie people who just keep hacking away at it, keep doing it.
Well, that's the thing. That's like Evil Dead, for instance, like Ash vs Evil Dead.
Yeah.
Like a lot of I saw a panel the other day, and it's like someone was like, what happened with why did they cancel Evil Dead? And he like kind of got up and he looked at everybody and he's like, that would be because of you fine folks who have watched it on pirate sites. He's like, and
you guys weren't watching it when you were supposed to be watching it.
Yeah, and it's a hard thing too, because like again, like the medium's been split up everywhere, and that's sort of like similar sort of thing. Like it's hard to be able to support everybody because I mean, let's face it, the rent's too damn high. So like everyone's just going through hard times.
Because this is how cable started. Cable started with all these channels that you had to pay for separately, and then they put them all together into a thing called cable. I'm waiting for them to do that with all these streaming.
Ooh, you're about to crack open a whole nother egg here. So basically, like all I will say is like there is a thing coming out that I've been hearing on the grapevine called Web3. And basically every creator's IP will be blockchained. So basically instantly copywritten. And it also means that as people anywhere on any platform, on any medium interacts with or purchases in any way that makes money, it goes back down that chain to the original creator.
There you go.
So I'm just like, without that, that's the abbreviated version. I'm sure someone's like, man, you're missing so much. I'm like, look, dude, Ralph, Written Writ Ralph is trying to wrap this up. I'm trying to keep you guys.
Dude, you guys are writers. Go do your research.
I'm trying not to be that guy.
So Nathan, anything else that we got to remember?
Wait. You want me to go over the list?
Go for it.
All right. Unfortunately, I don't have the list completely in front of me, but I do have a pretty decent memory. I like to say to a degree. It may not be the sharpest, but it will suit the needs of tonight. So we have our good old casual, always on the Kickstarter chain, Cat Calamia, El Franco, and Pat Shand. All of them have Kickstarters going on. We also have our friends who over at Lunar Smoke who also have a Kickstarter going on. Fabrice and his partner have the Shakespeare Kickstarter also closing either tonight or tomorrow. I can't recall which of the 2 days.
Yeah, they were like 36 hours when we saw this yesterday, right?
50 something yesterday.
All right, so they come near. Yeah, they're near the end.
And then we also have our good old Applebite, Mata Sorcier, with her Kickstarter also currently going on. I believe Ralph wants to talk a little bit more about that. However, I believe the last person that I am trying to remember, there's one person I can't remember, but they were on the show yesterday.
Oh, wait. Yesterday we had Dennis Knight, and wow, that was just yesterday, and I can't remember.
Well, that's a good reason for you to subscribe and follow the channel to keep up with all the information that we got going on. This is a weekly show that has. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, DM Ray. His book will be kicking off in 5 days. Yeah, 5 days now. And if you guys like your D&D and you like fantasy stories, then you should check out DM Ray's The Madcaps.
There you go. And if there's anything more, be sure to tune in. We'll continue to update as we keep going on. This is a live show, everyone.
Yep, and like Mr. Nathan was talking about there goes Sacrimony from Mata Sorcier, and she is doing a fantastic job. She does great art. She does everything herself. She's the writer, the letterer, she does everything, folks. And one of my favorite lines that she has is that she does all this stuff and she can't even afford to pay herself. So go help her out, help her pay herself. Go and support this. She is at 2,195. She's already funded. She's at 106 backers. 15 days to go. We can get her up to 3,000, 4,000 too. Come on, it's a great book, beautiful art. And that, folks, is everything. AZ, any last words?
Oh, I don't. If I say more words, we'll have more tangents. Just warning.
You get 3 words.
For having me
3
on.
words.
3 words.
I get 3. Thank you all.
Let's
AZ,
go.
always a pleasure, AZ. I love having you on because we geek out like crazy. And folks, you can see because we did a great big show today. And you guys who are just joining us now, go rewind and rewatch, man. All right, with
Absolutely.
that,
It's
folks,
always a
I will
pleasure.
press the button, and where it stops, nobody knows.